format of tonight's meeting is to have a guest speaker share their experience, strength and hope on how the Alcoholics Anonymous programme of recovery is working in their lives for 15 to 20 minutes. Tonight we've asked Greg to share.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm Greg. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Greg.
And I'm Saturday and I'm pleased to be here. Yeah, it's always good to be asked to share at a meeting, and I go to mostly small meetings now, and so I don't often get to share for 20 minutes, so I'm in luck. I don't know whether you're in luck, but I'm in luck. Look, Alcoholics Anonymous has really changed my life. It's changed my life in unexpected ways. I came to the fellowship when I was 32, and I was desperate, as you do. I don't think you come to AA without being desperate, and I'd been drinking since university, and drinking more than my peers, and also having had a greater effect on me than my peers, and I blacked out a lot. Suffered a lot from blackouts, which I found very bewildering and confusing, and ultimately it was really hard for me to put into words how frightening I found the blackouts, and my response to it was to try and protect myself when I was drinking, so I drank more at home, and because I figured if I was going to have a blackout, then that would be the place to have it. But I'd ring people up or get in my car and drive or do all sorts of things, so drinking at home wasn't a real solution, and I did a lot of those things of trying to control the drinking, of cutting up my plastic cards so I wouldn't have money, and not carrying money, and only to be 6 hours later crawling around underneath the seat of my car looking for coins so I could buy more grog or bought money from people and stuff. It was, my resolutions to change my drinking only ever lasted a matter of hours. And I think a lot of us have been there, where we're really determined not to drink, and then we drink again, and that twist that happens where the determination just vanishes and the drinking starts again, and that feeling that one is too many and 1,000's not enough is a feeling I felt a lot. And I would drink 9 times out of 10 I'd drink until there was none left, or I had no money, or I couldn't actually get it in. The 1 time out of 10 something else would stop me drinking, and I wouldn't get to do that. But my drinking was until I could get no more in, and so I went to a psychiatrist. I knew I had a series of good opportunities which I mashed up because I kept getting drunk at the most inappropriate time. And they were overseas, and I came back to Australia, and I went to my GP and said, well, the drinking's got me. I didn't know it, but I had, what I later heard people say in AA, this feeling of impending doom. I'd been frequently drinking and driving with one eye closed, so there'd be not so many tail lights, and wanting to be caught, so some power outside of myself would stop me. So I went to the GP, and the GP, thankfully, didn't ask me any questions about my drinking, because I'd been asked questions about drinking before, and I always lied. And you know, I think I'm a truthful person, but I always lied. And you know, people would say, "How much did you drink?" And I say, "I had a few." And I had been hospitalised a couple of years before for a erratic heartbeat, which was terrifying me. And they asked me how much I drank, and I told them a quarter of what I drank, and they thought that was a bit too much. And you know, I was just incapable of being honest. And so when the doctor didn't ask me, you know, I think this was, you know, a beautiful thing. And so she sent me to a psychiatrist who offered me controlled drinking first, which I think was a terrific thing to do, because at 32, although I was beaten, I was still stubborn, and I wasn't going to accept advice that had me not drinking. It's an awful space to be in, that space. And he offered me controlled drinking and asked me to come back and tell him what happened. And this went on for a few weeks where, you know, I got drunk and went back and got drunk and went back and got drunk and went back. And then he said, it amazes me that he said this, but he said, "You're a smart bloke." I thought, he's finally, I've got through to him, I thought. "You're a smart bloke. What's the conclusion that you come to?" And I went, "I can't stop drinking." And, you know, he wasn't, I don't know, Jewish, but he did something to the effect of, went holy vey, and said, "Well, people who can't stop drinking should go to AA." And, you know, I thought I was a man of the world, but I didn't know about this AA thing, so I went and, on his instructions, and went to the Hawthorn meeting, and was in a church facility, and it was nice and, you know, oldie world. And, you know, I thought it was quite amazing, but I thought the people were odd, and I didn't like the God. So I asked the psychiatrist to give me some dispensation on the God. And he gave me this kooky story about, you know, some patient of his having a tram as a higher power. I thought, oh, I'm out of my depth here. This doctor's out of his depth. But I'll keep going, because I was attracted by the honesty. And, you know, my life with drinkers, they were just either full of bravado or maudlin. They were just like me. They were either going to conquer the world or they were being crushed by the world. It was one or the other. There was no in between. And I heard honest people at this meeting, so I kept coming back, and you know, and I drank again, but I kept coming back, and you know, again after a while, just this whole idea of you know, there's a little moment of teachability, and I asked some old timer, you know, how often should I go to meetings? And if he had have said, honestly, if he had have said go to 90 meetings in 90 days, I would have run from the rooms, because that was just like advice with a capital A. But what he said it was his suggestion that I came to meetings as often as I drank. I thought, oh gee, as often as I drank. If I drink every day. And so, he didn't tell me what to do, he posed a question. And so I started coming to meetings every day I started to really strongly identify. Unfortunately, the very first emotion I got back was paranoia. I got very paranoid that, I was the worst of the world and that, the things that I'd done would catch up with me. And there's a whole series of circumstances caused me to really have faith in AA. I went overseas because I was frightened. Then I was more frightened. And I just went to meetings. And, and the stuff washed over me and I did... AA was a bit different when I got to AA and no one said hi, no one held hands. And I asked the guy who became my sponsor that I wanted to do the steps like in the book, and he said, which book? So, that's the kind of where it was at. And I started working my way through that, and I had this uncanny ability to really, I can see now in hindsight, there's a very grandiose filter, and I wanted to be the worst, and I wanted to beat myself up the most, and I wrote, a ripper sin list that posed as an inventory, and it wasn't very systematic, but it did teach me something, that I'd rearrange history to suit myself. I always wanted to make myself, the victim. I didn't want to take responsibility for things. If I was mean to someone, it's because they were mean to me first. That was the view of the world that I had, and from this resentment, at least I could see that, in fact, I'd been a prick. And I'd been a prick a lot, and the world was fighting back. And really the only mechanism I had to fight back with was to get drunk and angry. So it was a whole new world to come to AA and learn that there were other things to do than be angry. That was a bit of a challenge for me because I was involved in politics and unions and the media and stuff, and I thought opinions mattered, and I thought being right mattered, and I thought beating the other guy mattered, and these were attitudes that are very difficult to maintain serenity and have those attitudes, because it turns every day into a battle. So I had to let go a lot of that, which was really hard because I really did think if I stopped fighting that I would just disappear. That if I didn't have a different opinion to you, that I would be worthless. And and I think one of the amazing things in AA was that we spend a lot of time here listening and not so much time talking, which was totally new in my life, because me in a pub with other people, everyone's talking and there's no one listening. Whereas here, I learned to listen. And I also learnt that opinions they weren't really the currency. They weren't the only currency in this world. And certainly that fighting people about opinions wasn't important, and that this was a big fellowship with lots of different, ways of doing it, and people who feel their way through the steps, lots of different ways. And I got attracted to the gentler side of AA, not to, a kind of a black belt way of doing it or a kind of masculine way of doing it, but a more gentle way that people who emphasise kindness and understanding and encouragement. And I was lucky enough to meet quite a few people like that, and that and to have the experience of being sponsored gently and then sponsoring people gently, and listening and trying to pray, even though I'm an agnostic, pray to not have to give advice, to pull back from giving advice and a commentary, and to let people have their own commentary and their own internal dialogue. And it's been fascinating for me because I'm the last to know about a lot of things. My life is, by no means perfect, and my internal dialogue is by no means always serene. But from working with others and saying to them, well, look, the answers come if we can sit quietly. If we can sit quietly, we'll get the answers. But sitting quietly is an art in itself, it's hard to do. And but the AA, the way the book's written, the way Bill Wilson talks about lots of things, where he often goes for the middle ground. There's lots of gentleness here, that if an answer is not appropriate to a problem, that we sit quietly with it and move on to another day and see what happens. And I guess the thing is, just connecting this back to my RIPA sin list that I had, I thought if my sin list fell into the wrong hands, that my life would be ruined. I don't know, something bad would happen with some grandiose sort. But I've heard everything that's on that list from the rooms. I've heard people talk about having done the same things, and I felt compassion for those people, and I felt a connection with them. And a little while later I realised that in fact that compassion had rubbed off on me as well, that my interpretation of the steps is that it's here for us to come to terms with our defects and be ready to let them go. It doesn't actually say they'll go. It's got to be ready to let them go. And I think that's much more friendly. It's a friendlier thing than trying to cut it out and chop it up. It's to say, it's a take all of me feeling. And it's partly, I think we can see it in that human characteristic of friendship. Like I have friends who I know have, let's say nasty sides to their personality, but I like them anyway. Because they're human. It's harder to be with people who are perfect. And I love the way that AA connects us through our humanity. Now, of course, we're bound by the desire to not drink one day at a time. And that gives us a unity. And it gives us an opportunity to really encourage people. So whether it's 36 days or X number of years, I've got a lot from tapping into the gentleness in this program and the wisdom in the Serenity Prayer and just the being encouraging and kind to other people, which I see every day here. I fully come to meetings expecting that to happen. And I think that's really terrific. It doesn't happen in many places in the world. It's not transactional, here it's hope. So thanks for letting me share.
Now observe